Time Walk with me.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Time Walk with me, or if it's your first time here, forget the back part, it's gone. Just for you though. I am the Time Walker, and this is the second version of my Baru Wurmspeaker deck. Baru is a 3/3 human druid that costs 2 generic and 2 green mana to cast. He doesn't have partner or choose a background, so this will be a mono green deck. Worms you control get +2/+2 and have trample, and if you pay 7 mana and a green mana, so 8 mana altogether, and tap him, you get a 4/4 worm, which then becomes a 6/6 worm as long as Baru is out. For 8 mana that kinda sucks, but the ability costs X less to activate, where X is the greatest power among worms you control. The last deck I made with him featured a lot of worms. I even got a bunch of bulk singles from my LGS to put in it. What a fool I was! I watched a Commander's Quarters video about Baru, and he gave me a much better direction to take this guy, and that's to rely on him to get my worms and to focus the rest of the deck on untapping and protecting him. There's one downside to doing it like this, and that's that the first time I use his ability, like I mentioned, it costs 8 mana, and the payoff is a 4/4 that becomes a 6/6 with trample as long as Baru is out. Once you have that worm though, the ability will only cost 1 generic, 1 green, and a tap. Fortunately, being a mono green deck, it has ways of getting to 8 mana long before the 8th turn. I think I was aware before of the importance of untapping Baru, but I wasn't really aware enough. Instill Energy. Put this on Baru and he'll be able to use his tap ability 1 additional time during your turn. Bull's Strength. This is good for giving Baru some emergency toughness in case someone wants to lightning bolt him, and it also untaps him. Nature's Chosen. This is very similar to Instill Energy. It lets you untap enchanted creature once during your turn, which is how it'll be used here, but it can only be played on your own creature, and it doesn't give the creature haste, and if the enchanted creature is white, you can tap it to untap target artifact, creature, or land. I've never even thought to use this card's last ability, but in another deck it could potentially come in handy, especially on a creature with an untap ability. 1000-Year Elixir. This gives Baru's tap ability haste, and cheaply untaps it once during your turn. Patriarch's Seal. This gives you a bit of ramp, and also untaps a legendary creature that you control, which Baru is. Vines of the Recluse. This bumps up Baru's power and toughness, and untaps it at instant speed for just 1 mana. Puppet Strings. You can tap or untap a target creature, so it can be used to make more worms with Baru, or it can be used to manipulate your opponent's creatures. Emerald Charm. This can untap any permanent, or do a couple of other potentially useful things. Sudden Spinnerets. For just 1 mana, this temporarily gives Baru a good amount of defense, and permanently gives it reach with a reach counter, making it a good blocker. Then it untaps it. Sting the Glinting Dagger. The illustration on this card would be a lot more impressive if it wasn't for the look on Sam's face. He's so doofy. But the card itself is really good. It gives equipped creature +1/+1 and haste, untaps it at the beginning of each player's combat phase, and gives it first strike as long as it's going up against a goblin or orc. This untap ability is amazing as long as you have enough mana to make a worm during each opponent's combat step as well as your own. Sareth the Viper's Fang, or Sereth the Viper's Fang? Sereth kinda sounds better. This gives other tapped creatures Death Touch, which is amazing with creatures that also have trample. It also gives other untapped creatures hexproof, turning all of your untapped spells and abilities into ways to protect Baru from spot removal. Then, to top it all off, it untaps another creature or land that you control. Seedborn Muse. This card is awesome and should be legendary. You get to share everyone's untap step, untapping even permanents that don't normally untap during your own untap step. If you have a few ways to untap Baru, this allows you to create massive numbers of trampling 6/6 worms very quickly. Boon of Boseiju. This gives a speedy offensive and defensive boost, as well as untapping Baru. And Leaping Ambush. This is like Sudden Spinnerets, except it doesn't permanently give Baru reach. It's still nice for a surprise block and then making another worm. These cards protect Baru in various ways, mostly by giving him hexproof or indestructible. Gaia's Gift, Ranger's Guile, Tamio's Safekeeping, Snakeskin Veil, and Royal Treatment. Second Harvest. This doubles your number of worm tokens. Arena of the Ancients. Why would I include a card that taps Baru and keeps him tapped? Because I have a lot of cards that untap him. Chances are my opponents won't have made that same consideration for their commanders. Master Chef. This makes your worms come out as 7/7 instead of 6/6. Manifold Key. This can untap any of the artifacts that untap Baru, or it can make something big unblockable. Once and Future. In a mono-green deck, this card's Adamant effect will most likely go off, giving you any 2 cards from your graveyard to your hand. It's 2 regrowths in 1. Coat of Arms. This makes your worms ridiculously big. The Millennium Calendar. This is just in here because I got it in a pack and I wanted to put it somewhere. Bloodline Pretender. Pick worm, and every time you make one, this guy gets bigger. Plus, with Changeling, this creature is a worm and benefits from the +2/+2 the Baru gives to worms. Sculpting Steel. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Skullwinder. This gives you a card back from your graveyard and helps you make an alliance. And Voltaic Key. This is here to untap stuff that untaps Baru. Goblin Firebomb. This is cool because it can destroy anything, even a land. Ram Through. Once you have a worm out, you can use this to take out a creature and maybe even do some damage to its controller for daring to put it on the battlefield. Meteor Golem. It's expensive, but later in the game, it can be a lifesaver. Unstable Obelisk. Until you have the mana to use its last ability, this makes a halfway decent ramp card. And when you do use it for spot removal, it can remove any spot, even a land. Bite Down. This feeds something to one of your worms. Wilt. This is a green disenchant with cycling. Hunter's Edge. Strengthen a worm and then feed it something. Beast Within. This is one of green's most iconic spot removal spells. The beast it gives your opponent will be no match for your worms. Natural End. Return to Nature. This is a green disenchant, plus it can exile a card from a graveyard. And Cosmic Hunger. This can take out a creature, a planeswalker, or a battle. Green is quite good at drawing, so I included a good amount of draw cards. Colossal Majesty. Even without Baru out, your worm tokens will be big enough to trigger this during your upkeeps. Hunter's Insight. At instant speed, this combat trick can get you a good amount of cards. Abundance. Of course Abundance is in here. It lets you control whether you draw a land or a non-land, and it makes those draws not count as drawing. Momentous Fall. Sacrifice a worm token and you'll draw 6 cards and gain 6 life for just 4 mana. Season of Growth. All the tokens you'll be making will set off this enchantment's scry ability several times per turn, and many spells in this deck will replace themselves in your hand with this out. Idol of Oblivion. If you've made a worm token, this will draw you a card. Elemental Bond. With this, your worms will fill up your hand. And Garruk's Uprising. This also fills up your hand as you create worms. These are all pretty straightforward, and I included more ramp than I usually do because the more mana I have, the more worms I can make. Neverwinter Dryad, Beanstalk Giant, Elvish Spirit Guide, Glittering Frost, Cultivate, Sylvan Scrying, Nature's Lore, Wild Growth, Boseiju Reaches Skyward / Branch of Boseiju, Grafted Growth, Arboreal Grazer, and Return from the Wilds. We got Forests, we got Encroaching Wastes, Slippery Karst, Tranquil Thicket, the Hunter Maze, and one of my new favorites, Crystal Grotto. So there we go, there we have it. That is my Baru Wurmspeaker 2.0 deck. Tell me what you think. Is this better than the way it was before? And I'll see you next time.